Do you ever have one of those days when you look at a project and say to yourself, what in the world was I thinking? This episode is one of those days. I just want to kick myself. But then, what good does that do? I need to come up with something that may not be optimal, but it will 100% do the job. Next time I build one of these, I will know better, except I don't plan on building another one. First thing though, I'm going to cut in a mortise in the inside of my front leg where my leg vise will be mounted. I already have a 3-ply groove in my rail by my feet. I also will have a mortise in the top as it gets put into place. And the third point of contact for the leg vise is, well, on the leg. This mortise will be just one more point of indexing for the leg vise to lock into place. I don't want the vise to have any movement in it once it gets put into place. I started off with my worst chisel. I was afraid that I might hit one of the screws from my gluing efforts on the legs. I was sure to leave room between the screws for the top tenon, but I don't know for sure that this leg vise mortise would also be clear of screws. I switched over to a 1/4-inch chisel after a bit so I could just plow through the main majority of the mortise material. Sure enough, there is the tip of a screw. I managed to notice it before hitting it with the chisel. I don't like damaging the edges of my chisels. It's a lot of work to grind out a nick that a screw would incur. This is a test fit of the 3-ply piece of scrap that would be indicative of the vise that will eventually go in this mortise. You can see that even given the small amount of surface area of the side walls of the mortise, that the joint will be very solid. If you add in the other 2 points of contact that the vise will utilize, you can see that the results are encouraging. Now you can see that I am starting to lay out some lines. And this is where we find ourselves with a grave design error. You see, when I was first designing this bench up within the cobwebs of gray matter in my mind, I didn't take into account the 42 layers of my top that would be glued together. Now the top's design calls for 5 threaded rods to go through and hold the top together, forever under tension. I got to thinking, though, that even with threaded rod, the chances that the top would warp or sag over time were quite high. With no support over the 30-inch span, I could just imagine the sag that would occur. Maybe not now, but almost certainly at some point in the future. I went to some Google images and looked at various Moravian workbenches, and it confirmed my suspicions. The top leg brace was placed so that it would naturally provide support for a top across its span. The only solution I could think of was to deface my beautiful leg design with a crosspiece that would be very functional, but detract from the look of the legs. It is fortunate that it will be hidden from view under the top. The thing is, now we both know that it exists, and that it is sitting there deriding my design choices for as long as this bench is around. Just a reminder, you really must be very careful around extremely razor-sharp tools. Even a small slip, and you will be rewarded with the joy of not realizing you cut yourself until you see blood showing up from somewhere. Now don't take your medical attention ideas from me. What I do is not the prescribed method for dealing with injury, and I don't even recommend it for anyone's use. For those of you whose curiosity will drive you crazy, I use a little super glue to glue the skin back together. I can get back to work immediately, as well as not bleed all over my work. A little electrical tape to keep this video from being visually unappealing. I am cutting 4 pieces of plywood to be used in the cross members. I will laminate 2 of them together to give us a strong vertical support for the top. This old Craftsman table saw has been souped up a bit, if you can call it that. I replaced the so-called peak 1.5 horsepower 120 volt motor with an actual 2 horsepower 220 volt motor. Since I was moving to 220 volts, I also replaced the switch with a magnetic switch upgrade. An amateur tip for you. When putting in the first screw, just get the tip to bite into the second piece some, but leave it sticking out. You can use it to index the other end, and alignment adjustments are easier. You will be less likely to have the grain redirect the original alignment if you don't sink that first screw in as far. Maybe it's just me, but you can see that even with cutting the video between each test fit, that cutting in mortises and fitting them to the tenon takes quite a bit of adjustment and fine-tuning to get them to fit well. Maybe it would go smoother if I had a workbench. I have to say, I feel a little bit like the movie Elf, where Buddy is working on Etch-a-Sketches. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. It's okay, Buddy. Just how many Etch-a-Sketches have you made? Well, now that we have solved the possibility of a sagging top, we can be rest assured that we have a pair of cubby holes underneath that will sit and collect a bunch of dust. Now don't go telling everybody about our little secret. Next episode, we will glue up the top. Man, I've waited a long time to do that. The do-or-die glue-up that will make or break this build. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.